Hey, welcome to Texas History Lessons. I'm Michael, and for those listening when this episode is first released, Happy New Year. I appreciate everybody that's been listening to the podcast and subscribing over at Substack to follow along with bonus materials. And with that said, let's get on to continuing our look at Lottie H. Hargrove's 1910 book, Texas History in Rhyme. Now, this post contains the fourth of six eras, the era of Revolution, 1830 to 1836. It's one of the most popular areas of interest and study in Texas history. And as you might expect, Lottie H. Hargrove devoted several pages in her book to this. So, as usual, I have added maps, illustrations, and links to more information so you can learn even more that interests you in this over on the Texas History Lesson Substack. It's free to join, so please do if you're interested in looking to that. But since it is going to be a lengthy one, let's get going. Era 4, Era of Revolution, 1830 to 1836. In 1824, Texas was much dismayed to be with Coahuila joined, yet no ill will displayed. For colonists were welcomed and lands were given free, till in 1830 Bustamante made a decree that settlers from the United States should be allowed no more to make their homes in Texas as had been done before. And then in 1833, by Mexico 'twas planned for colonies of convicts to be on Texas land. And to collect the taxes were troops of soldiers sent, on making Texans trouble they seemed to be intent. Right here it might be stated, to give all fairness due, some would not pay just taxes, and smuggled goods in too. The laws against the Texans to Bradburn gave delight. All ports but Anahuac he closed, regardless of their right. 'Twas by such deeds of tyranny Texans became offended. At last they rose in anger, and some injustice ended. This last they could not suffer, so a demand they made, that one port should be opened and should not be delayed. Then under military rule, Bradburn the coast declared, 17 were taken prisoners, as criminals they fared. Their comrades on the Trinity took arms their friends to aid. Of Captain Bradburn's soldiers, 20 were prisoners made. Bradburn agrees then to exchange, but when our men accept and go to the Fort Anahuac, he still the prisoners kept, and fired on the commissioners who went to bring them back. The Texans without cannon the fort could not attack, but there at Turtle Bayou, earnest indignant men declared for Santa Anna, who seemed a patriot then. John Austin went for cannon to Brazoria with his men. Ugartequea then refused to let them pass again. So they fired on Fort Velasco. Ugartequea tried most bravely to defend it, but his guns they defied. The Mexicans surrendered, and then the Texans learned that peace was made at Anahuac, so they to homes returned. For Colonel Piedras, far more just than Captain Bradburn, came, and found that for the trouble the captain was to blame. Bradburn from office was removed, the Americans were freed, the colonists to hasten home were very glad indeed. Now Santa Anna boasted he'd die in freedom's cause, and free the Texas people from Bustamante's laws. On the first day of October, 1832, at San Felipe de Austin, some patriots, true, met in their first convention to ask redress for wrongs, and make petition for the right that to each man belongs. They said, to Santa Anna we've faithful been each one. Now we will ask him for our rights, he will have justice done. But Santa Anna coolly to their wants gave no heed, except to say that Texas close watching seemed to need. And then with Bustamante he made a compromise, in the December of this year, that caused his friends surprise. In April 1833, again the Texans met at San Felipe de Austin, some juster laws to get, to be free from Coahuila, once more made separate, and with their officers and laws to be a single state. With a memorial all alone, brave Stephen Austin went to Mexico and hoped to get the president's consent. In Mexico, strife and disease were causing much distraction, and Austin from the government got little satisfaction. but was instead imprisoned more than 1 weary year. And though he asked for trial, no one his cause would hear. The Texas troubles still increased. 'Twas Santa Anna's scheme to be named as the dictator and make his power supreme. He tried to govern Texas in 1835 by strictest military rule, but this plan did not thrive. Quite gloomy was the outlook in this eventful year. From treacherous Santa Anna, Texans had much fear. But still they were not hopeless. Austin, released at last, returned to aid the colonies when war clouds gathered fast. To help in getting justice and safety to provide, committees were appointed, some matters to decide. At Anahuac and elsewhere, disputes and strife arose. The patriot days of Allah found Mexicans were foes. Now General Coase with soldiers was sent to make it plain that Texans should be punished who tried their rights to gain. A skirmish at Gonzales announced war was begun. The Texans, under Colonel Moore, an easy victory won. So now in eastern Texas, Sam Houston was elected to be commander of the troops and keep their homes protected. And Austin at Gonzales was the commander made, while De Zavala came to give the patriots his aid. Their capture next of Goliad made hearts with gladness beat. In the Battle of Concepcion, their victory was complete. Again at San Felipe they met for consultation, not claiming independence, but righteous arbitration. And Wharton, Archer, Austin were sent to make appeal to the United States for aid, and Texas's wrongs reveal. Pleased with the sense and courage the people all displayed, two companies from New Orleans by nothing were delayed, but came at once to Texas to help the cause along, and greatly cheered the Texans with courage true and strong. The troops chose Edward Burleson to lead in Austin's place, the foe in San Antonio, they're eager now to face. But General Burleson delayed, said troops would be dismissed December 4th, but this command the army did resist. Then finding, too, that General Coase was ignorant of his plan, he granted to Ben Milam, a brave and fearless man, to lead the army onward to San Antonio. With cheer on cheer they follow, some storm the Alamo. While Milam with his company entered the city's street, from house to house they struggled, and never made retreat. And thus the bloody conflict raged fiercely 5 days and nights. The Mexicans in terror fled from the fearful sights. A flag of truce December 9th by General Coase was raised. The Mexicans surrendered, and Texans should be praised. Their treatment of the prisoners was generous and kind. Well had it been if Mexicans had kept these things in mind. All officers with General Coase were free allowed to go, if they against Americans would not help Mexico. The other prisoners could go or stay as they desired. To fight no more against Texas was all that was required. 150 Mexicans died in this bloody fray, and only 2 Americans, but great was the dismay to lose their brave Ben Milam, one of those 2 who fell. They gave their lives most bravely, serving their country well. Now from the hostile Mexicans, Texans rejoiced to be relieved at last, and hope to have a land entirely free. The Texas soldiers are dismissed. They thought the war was through, but just to guard the city, they left a very few. When news of this surrender was to Santa Anna told, he swore to punish Texans for such behavior bold. So now, in 1836, the war clouds gather dark. The soldiers at the Alamo are Santa Anna's mark. He thought with his great army to punish each and all. On those at San Antonio, his vengeance first should fall. On February 23rd, this band of heroes brave withdrew into the Alamo and sent for help to save. In vain they send the message, their call was heard too late. A small band from Gonzales came to share their comrades' fate. Just 32 brave spirits on March 1st came to cheer the garrison with courage, but now the worst was near. For Santa Anna's army numbers 6,000 men. All hope they yield of seeing kindred or homes again. On March 6th, the attack is made after the midnight hour. For Santa Anna thus decrees, Texans shall feel his power. The Mexicans plant ladders to scale the fort's high walls. Under the fire of Texas guns, the men by hundreds fall. But o'er their fallen comrades the Mexicans are driven by swords of mounted cavalry, no chance for turning given. And thousands face the 185, who stand ready to die like heroes, a faithful, fearless band. There Travis fell, and Bonham, Crockett, and Bowie died, and all their comrades brave as they fell fighting side by side. A bitter wail of sorrow swept over Texas then. Woe, woe to Santa Anna for murder of brave men. Fierce was the fight, but proudly upon our history's page the story of the Alamo is told from age to age. And as their bodies were consumed in one great funeral pyre, the country rose to vengeance and freedom in that fire. At Austin now a monument of granite stands to show the names of those true heroes killed at the Alamo. From deeds of war and carnage we must now turn to view the governor and council and what they tried to do. More men for war were needed, more money men to pay. The council and the governor could not agree, they say. This caused to General Houston much trouble and delay the execution of the plans he for the army made. Also throughout the winter the wives and children need their husbands and their fathers' care. For them at home they plead. One little gleam of sunshine brings hope to every heart, a loan from the United States who takes the Texans' part. Then comes March 1st, the noted day when the convention met, and next March 2nd is the date Texans will not forget. For free and independent Texas was then declared, and for a new republic the plans were then prepared. Burnet was chosen president, Zavala, patriot true, was chosen as vice president, to him an honor due. Sam Houston for the army in chief command they place, under his care the soldiers shall never know disgrace. And to recruit the army it was by law decreed that able-bodied citizens should serve if there was need. Not younger, though, than 17, nor more than 50 years, should any in the army be, as by their rule appears. Now Burnet moved state papers to Harrisburg and then to Galveston to keep them from Santa Anna's men. For throughout all the country was terror and affright, looking for Santa Anna to come by day and night. General Urrea also came from Mexico to take the Texas towns along the coast and many prisoners make. One scheme, the Matamoros plan, abandoned, it is true, still led to some disasters, as such schemes always do. While Fannin, Grant, and Johnson go forth for an attack, Johnson and Grant hear Fannin of horses has a lack. So Grant towards the Rio Grande with his men went and brought some prisoners and horses back, and this time was not caught. Then Grant and Johnson also made for horses made a raid. Johnson returned, but Grant more bold, too long return delayed. For by Urrea's men attacked, Grant and his men are slain. Though Grant and Brown gallop for life, their race is all in vain. For Grant is killed, and Brown is made a prisoner, but fair Senora Alvarez so pleads that now his life they spare. Then San Patricio captured, most of the men are killed, but Johnson and a few escape, for Providence so willed. The people at Refugio to Fannin sent for aid, to protect them from Urrea, of whom they are afraid. So Captain King is sent to them, with 27 men. He safely reached Refugio, and started back again. By the Mexicans appearing, he to the mission went, and 4 more troops to help him at once to Fannin sent. 150 men, with Colonel Ward make haste. They reach Refugio indeed, but here much time they waste, debating who shall take command. King and his men leave first, and by the enemy are slain, but this is not the worst. Ward well at first the fort defends, but ammunition fails. He leaves the church, and Mexicans his little band assails, and trusting to Urrea, they surrender. But too late, they find Urrea cannot save them from a martyr's fate. Then Houston sends to Fannin Goliad at once to leave, but of Colonel Ward and King no news Fannin did receive. At last he starts. They march 9 miles, and then they stop to rest, not far from the Colito. Some did not think it best. and in an hour the Mexicans were there on every side. The Texans now could not retreat. To fight they bravely tried. Almost they won when darkness made the dread slaughter cease, but for the suffering Texans the nighttime brought no peace. With no water for the cannon or for the wounded men, they saw Urea reinforced when morning came again. There was no way but surrender. The white flag was displayed. Colonel Fannin and Urea terms of surrender made. The promises were written fair, but broken in a day. None thought that Santa Anna such baseness could display. To Goliad the Texans were sent, and Colonel Ward was brought a prisoner with his men, all under a strong guard. March 26th, Palm Sunday, the men were formed in line, marched half a mile, and then, by devilish design, were halted, shot down like beasts, defenseless and unarmed. A few ran madly for their lives, and so escaped unharmed. The officers the same fate shared, the wounded murdered too. 'Twas Santa Anna ordered his men such deeds to do. Some officers conceal a few, and Senora Alvarez is kind to all the Texans, and saves many a one from death. When the massacre is over, the dead are rudely piled, with brush and set on fire, and yet the sunshine smiled. The world heard of this horror, and censured act and thought, while Santa Anna made excuse for deeds so evil wrought. The Congress of the Mexicans, he said, had long declared that of all foreigners with guns no lives should now be spared. His words were but a mockery, as all his deeds have shown. If there had been a law like that, Urea would have known. Santa Anna now believes his work in Texas done. The Alamo and Goliad have been great victories won. His officers protest there is much more for him to do. Texans their cause will not desert, they say. 'Tis surely true. At Alamo and Goliad many were from the states, and vengeance to the Mexicans for deeds so base awaits. So these officers persuade Santa Anna to decide to stay a while in Texas and his army to divide. He arranges 5 divisions so he can quickly make himself master of all Texas, and towns and hamlets take. When Houston went from Washington to Gonzales in command of Texas troops collected there was terror in the land. From Santa Anna's forces, Houston's retreat was wise. To make his army larger and better drilled he tries. People were going eastward. President Burnet tried in vain, issuing a proclamation to get them to remain. And men would leave the army, their families to see, though Houston said not that way could they make Texas free. And Houston kept on working with a brave and steadfast heart, while Captain Cards and Deaf Smith most nobly did their part. At Harrisburg were numbered 800 soldiers true. These showed the waiting people what could be done by few. Now Santa Anna's army, starting to devastate Natchitoches, turns aside to Harrisburg too late to capture President Burnet and officials, so he burns the town and to New Washington quiet boastfully returns. Here now good news for Houston. Some captives to him brought on the 18th of April tell him the news he sought, that Santa Anna comes himself with soldiers in advance, divided from the others, and now was Houston's chance. He stops retreat, turns in pursuit, and stops at Lynchburg near, where San Jacinto's waters flow outward, fresh and clear. A camping place he then selects, Twin Sisters placing near, stations his men, and waits to see the enemy appear. And truly they are close at hand, but skirmishes are all, till Santa Anna goes to camp, as shades of evening fall. And so they wait the dawning. Too long seem hours of night, till the 21st of April dawns on them clear and bright. 500 came with General Coast to Santa Anna's side. There they piled up a breastwork, and all attack defied. The bridge at Vince's Bayou Deaf Smith did then destroy. To stop the Mexicans' retreat would give him real joy. At 3 o'clock the Texans were ordered on parade, and General Houston told them they must not be dismayed. Though Santa Anna's army numbered twice as many more, the 700 Texans should fight as ne'er before. They should think of murdered comrades, think of children, home, and wife, and with a purpose true and righteous, they would conquer in the strife. Gladly did they hear the order. Hearts rejoiced, though lips were dumb, as they formed their lines in silence, without sound of fife or drum. The Mexicans piled saddles and baggage sacks in front, with brushwood on the left and right, to meet the battle's brunt. There the Mexicans were resting on that April afternoon, but they hastened to make ready when they heard their martial tune. And the Texas force came dashing, shouting out the fearful call. Now the Alamo remember, Goliad remember, all. Oh, the Texans did remember how those dreadful deeds were done, then like demons fought for vengeance and in 20 minutes won. While the Mexicans were running, seeking safety in retreat, me no Alamo, they pleaded, falling at their victor's feet. Me no Goliad, not always, did the cries the pleaders save. Others plunging in the bayou found at last a watery grave. For Deaf Smith and his companions Vince's bridge had well cut down. No retreat was for the conquered. They must either yield or drown. When at last the fighting ended and the cries of war were stilled, 730 prisoners and 230 killed. The full number of the wounded was 208 more, and $12,000 taken, weapons, horses, mules galore. Of the Texans killed while fighting, history tells there were but 2. Of the 23 then wounded, 6 in death they sadly rue. But for April 22nd we should give a hearty cheer, for they captured Santa Anna hiding in the forest near, and they brought him to see Houston, lying wounded neath a tree. Houston treated him politely, as a president should be. Rusk and Houston made no treaty. To armistice they agreed. His orders the dictator sent for Filisola's heed. The Mexicans should all withdraw to San Antonio and to Victoria and await commands that all should know. Then President Burnett came in haste to General Houston's side. With them the cabinet consult, but cannot soon decide. What kind of treaty should they make? For some did boldly say, for Santa Anna's cruel deeds his life alone should pay. Therefore they went to Galveston, Houston to New Orleans. Then President Burnett's cabinet at Velasco soon convenes, and there they made a treaty that all the world admired, and Texas won the honors that she so much desired. According to this treaty, President Burnett tries to send Santa Anna to his country and does assistance lend. But the people and the soldiers say that way should not be. 'Tis too good for the dictator, and they will not set him free. But after months of hardship, as a prisoner here and there, when Houston is the president of Texas Republic fair, to Jackson, then the president of the United States, he sends poor Santa Anna, and all his woes relates. So Jackson says in mercy, Santa Anna shall not roam as exile any longer, therefore he sends him home. Thus at last the war is over, Texas is surely free, but still there are some troubles, such things will always be. Commissioners by Burnett in May were quickly sent to ask for annexation to the U.S. government. But when to Washington they came, the Congress had adjourned, so for advice to Jackson with confidence they turned, and Jackson sent down Moffett to look at Texas well. If it deserves to be a state, he better then can tell. Now to their farms and families some men are free to go, but others watch for Mexicans who still might work them woe. When Filisola's army had crossed the Rio Grande, words of relief and thankfulness were heard throughout the land. And thanks to the Texas Navy for doing its very best, in any time of danger, those 4 ships stood the test. General Rusk in Houston's place commander-in-chief was made. He followed Mexicans to sea, the treaty was obeyed. And on June 3rd at Goliad, the Texans camped once more, nearby where Fannin and his men were massacred before. The soldiers gathered the remains of those dead heroes true, and sadly give them burial with all the honors due. And the Lone Star Republic, at last thank God is free, the land and home of honest hearts, may it forever be. And thus ends Lottie H. Hargrove's Era 4 Era of Revolution.
You are listening to Texas History Lessons, a slow walk through Texas history made in Texas by a Texan for everyone everywhere.
Now, I should point out, it's interesting to look at this because this is the version of Texas history that was prevalent from the end of the 19th century through most of the 20th century. And it is a pretty succinct, wrapped up version, but it's not the whole story. There are some people that were at the time in the 1830s present during the Revolution that didn't think the decisions Houston made were right, and he had some enemies for a lot of his career. And that's something I'll talk about in the future. But this is an interesting historical artifact in itself because it shows how people were taught to think and look at the history of Texas. And it's still the prevalent view, I think, throughout the whole state. There are a lot of nice little summaries within the poem. Some of it is better than other as far as it goes when it comes to rhyme. She did a pretty good job. Again, I want to give credit to Lottie H. Hargrove for the effort she put into summarizing Texas history as presented by Pennybacker in her Texas history book, which was the dominant history text for young students in the state for many, many, many years. And so with that, we're going to end. That was a long one, and we'll get to Era 5, Era of the Republic, next, and that'll then close up with Hargrove's version of Era of the State. And that one is a lengthy one. It's packed with stuff you probably have never heard. So look forward to that. And I hope this new year finds you doing well. And for people finding this episode in the future, far away from the new year, I hope you're still doing well, whenever that time may be. The theme music, as always, is by the great Derek McClendon. Please check out his music if you get the chance. If you enjoy this and want to learn more, go to Texas History Lessons Substack and sign up for free, subscribe, and you will get this and a lot of other history materials there for your enjoyment and edification. So take care of yourself, take care of one another, be kind. Adios.